Hi guys, here's another video on face and body reading. In this video I wanted to talk about the almost 7-year-long civil war in Syria and the committed war crimes. Russia just blocked for the 9th time an UN resolution against ally Syria to extend investigations on the chemical attacks in April, which left 92 people dead. The government of dictator Bashar al-Assad blames Syrian rebels for this. This civil war has become a symbol of a modern global, highly complex conflict, resulting in mass migration and affecting the whole planet. The lines between perpetrators and victims have been blurred and mixed up by propaganda and fake news. Here I wanted to look at a couple of interviews of Bashar al-Assad. Now it is generally difficult to read politicians as they're used to deception, as part of their job even, which is even more true for dictators. Overall, Assad and his wife Asma, who were both educated in England, look innocent, soft-spoken, and even in a recent body language interviews, the congruency between what Assad said and his body language were supposed to support his innocence. Here I come to a slightly different conclusion. Okay, let's get started. Okay, in the first video, which is from 2006, so quite a while ago, prior to the civil war, I looked for a baseline.
Take a moment to talk about your personal journey.
Yeah.
You were in England
Yeah.
studying ophthalmology.
Yeah.
Your father, your brother, who was on a track to be a leader in Syria, was killed in a tragic automobile accident in 1994.
Yeah.
You get the call from your father to come back.
Yes.
What did he say?
So here he has a slight smile. He's not too upset about when he talks about his brother's death. However, sometimes out of politeness, we put on a brave smile. However, here I would say he's not too hung up about his brother's death. I'm just using this as well to get a baseline for later.
Actually, I called him.
Yeah, big smile here, but I don't want to interpret too much into it.
I called him because I knew before him.
About the death of your brother?
Yes, somebody from our relative from our family called me, and I called my father from London.
So he's very soft-spoken, yeah. So he has very good manners. He's very well educated. Hard to picture him as a brutal dictator who tortures people.
That they told me such bad news.
Did you have to tell him about your brother's death?
I hadn't known that there was death or what. I just knew that there was accident. So I didn't.
It's a little bit an odd story about he knew before, but he didn't know about his death.
Knowing that your world had changed.
Not exactly, but the same day, yes. At the end of the day, when I came back to Damascus, I took the decision to come back.
So it's a lot of back and forth, slightly odd somehow. But let's move to a later place.
Your father could teach a master class in politics of the Middle East.
Yeah.
Tell me what you learned from him.
So Charlie Rose is also a very friendly, very soft interviewer. So his father was a dictator as well, so he's presenting him as someone who can teach a nice masterclass.
You'd be surprised if I tell you we've never talked about politics.
Yeah, is that surprising?
We lived as any ordinary family. You'll be in touch with the people, with the public problems. You will learn from the people. And you'll have the chance to...
So here says it's going to be interesting here.
Analyze.
So here's a claw.
Your father as president.
So this was a classic Freudian slip of the tongue. So he wanted to say predator, but then he corrected himself to say president, and he has his claw.
Positions.
So he has his claw hand to support this.
Have the chance to
A slight expression of disgust at this moment.
analyze.
So here's a claw, quite symbolic.
Your father as
Predator.
president from his
Slight asymmetric mouth shrug, slightly embarrassed about this.
political positions and decisions.
One other thing to note is already at this younger age, there's this asymmetry between the two sides of his face, which gets more pronounced later. This is not so uncommon, but we have to remember here that the right side of the brain is responsible for emotions and controls the left side of the body, so the left side of the face, while the left side of the brain is responsible for logic and controls the right side of the body and the right side of the face. So if there's an inner conflict or some sort of sadness, we often see in people, especially older people, that this reflects on their left side of the face. So we see often is that the eye corners go down, sort of an expression of sadness. And we also get the sadness line at the mouth corner. This is something which is known from Chinese face reading. You might think, now, why is he talking about Chinese face reading? Isn't he promoting science? So Chinese face reading is thousands of years old. The Taoist monks, they weren't allowed to treat female bodies, so they had to just look at their faces in particular and deduce illnesses and things about their life. So it's not so different if you run a modern neural network in machine learning or artificial intelligence, trying to find correlations between facial features and lifestyle and character features. So if you would run this, I claim, many images and examples of people's faces, I would say you can detect similar correlations. So to me, it's a very old way of doing science in medicine. So overall, I like it, actually. Okay, let's go to a later stage of the interview.
And who says there was no Holocaust?
So now this is about the Holocaust.
If you ask many people in the region, they'll tell you such a thing. Not there's no Holocaust. Let's say they exaggerated. There's such a perception of this event.
So it's funny, he's not talking about himself, no, he's talking about many people have this perception. So he's slightly deflecting here the question, but of course this is really remarkable how he speaks about known historic and really terrible events. So we see this also in later interviews. It's often about redefining terms and events in the past and his own reality.
Of this title, let's say, the Holocaust.
Title, odd words.
Our region.
You don't believe that, though, do you? You don't believe that they exaggerated the number of deaths the Jews suffered in World War II?
It's not a matter how many were killed. 60.
So here again, a slight sign of disgust here on the asymmetric pulling up of the mouth corner. So here again, he's redefining things in his own terminology and words. So he's essentially avoiding answering questions.
6 million or 1 million or half. The killing is killing. So it's not a matter of, how many Soviets were killed? 8 millions.
Yes.
So deflecting here again. So this is sort of the baseline. This is sort of his belief system, and this is how he speaks about historic events, and he often redefines words.
First of all, whenever you have war, you will have very bad side effects. Any war.
So this is something which sounds fine. It sounds true, obviously, but he keeps saying this even years later when his country is devastated by civil war. So he has these repetitions, the same belief system, which is kind of stuck with him. This is now at least 10 years later.
Look, when they say that we are bombarding the hospital, it means that we are killing civilians. That's the meaning of it.
So here he asks the question, why would governments kill civilians in hospitals or bombard hospitals? So these kind of rhetoric questions are often asked by perpetrators. In some ways, they try to get a response and see how other people react to that question. They try to find rationales themselves in a sense to justify it.
You are talking about killing Syrians. When we kill Syrians as a government or as army, the biggest part
Here he misspoke.
Syrian society will be against us. You cannot succeed in your war if you are killing.
So again, he uses body language. It's quite congruent with what he's saying as illustrators he's using. So these would be normally good signs.
Civilians. So this story...
And again, very soft-spoken, quite high voice.
Narrative is a mendacious narrative, to be frank.
Complicated words.
Of course, unfortunately, every war is bad war, and every war have innocent victims, whether children, women, elderly.
So he's basically saying the same thing he said 10 years ago. Yeah, sort of the simple wisdom, that every war is bad war and its side effects. Okay, let's go to a later time point.
Regarding the barrel bomb, I want to ask you what the definition of barrel bomb. If you go to our army, you don't have in our record something called barrel bomb. So
here, this is sort of typical for Assad. It's about defining the words very carefully, and depending what the definition is, you basically get out of the question.
How do you understand and just want to know how I can answer you? What a barrel bomb is?
So he's deflecting the question, so the question is going nowhere.
Independent, and Amnesty International is not independent, and it's not impartial.
ICRC?
We did discuss it with the Red Cross. We didn't discuss it. It should be discussed in our institution. If we want to allow, if there's allegations.
So it sounds like a nice answer, but he's a dictator. He's basically governing the whole thing. So of course he's deflecting here at this moment.
It could be discussed. We don't say yes or no, but
So it looks very congruent, but I guess he's believing what he's saying.
That you have mentioned, it was a report made by Qatar and financed by Qatar. You don't know the source, you don't know the names of those victims, nothing verified about that report. It was paid.
So he is also about the definition of what evidence is, and he brings it up in other videos as well. So photos, witnesses, reports from independent governmental institutions, all these don't count as evidence. So the strict definition of evidence doesn't allow anything to be called evidence.
Paid by Qatar directly in order to verify and smear the Syrian government and the Syrian army.
There are a lot of eyewitnesses.
No one knows who are they. You don't have anything clear
So
about that.
none of the evidence counts as
Open
evidence.
the door for organizations like Red Cross.
It's not my decision to tell you yes or no. We have institution. If we need to
So he is deflecting again.
discuss this part, we need to go back to the institution before saying yes or no.
So it sounds all very good, but it's all very hollow and it doesn't mean anything.
If you walk through Damascus, your picture is everywhere. In every shop, in every restaurant, in every car. A symbol for a dictator.
There's a difference between dictator and dictatorship. Dictator is about the person. I didn't ask anyone to put my picture in Syria, and never.
So here again, it's about the definitions, the subtle distinction between dictator and dictatorship. By discussing the definition, he doesn't have to answer the question anymore, or the question goes up in smoke. So these word plates are very typical. Okay, let's go to another interview from 2017.
Mr. President, did you give an order to strike Khan Sheikhun with chemical weapon last Tuesday?
So that's a yes or no question.
Actually, no one has investigated what happened that day in Khan.
He's distancing himself from the question by putting a lot in between the answer and the actual question.
And Sheikhun till that moment. As you know, Khan Sheikhun is under the control of al-Nusra Front.
Okay, what was the question?
Al-Qaeda. So the only information.
We see the sadness lines on both sides of the mouth corners, and we see strong evidence of disgust here. This is sort of carved in his face now, which represent his inner mentality and his inner motivation. Carved disgust.
Is published by Al-Qaeda branch. No one has any other information. We don't know if the whole pictures or videos that we've been seeing are true or fabricated. That's why we
So 30 seconds later, he still hasn't given an answer.
asked for
So it's very suspicious.
investigation to what happened in Khan Sheikhun. This is the second. Al-Qaeda sources said that the attack happened at 6:30 in the morning, while the Syrian attack in
So
the
he still hasn't answered the question.
same area was at around noon, between 11:30 to 12. So they're talking about two different
So it's a minute later, roughly.
stories or event. So there was no order to
So here now he's answering question someone with no.
make any attack. We don't have any chemical weapons. We gave up our arsenals a few years ago. Even if we have them, we wouldn't use them, and we had never used our chemical arsenal in our history.
So here it almost sounds like a little prepared rhyme. It goes down very easily. He's going back and forth between the left and right side with his head in congruency with what he's saying. But what's the problem is the answer was way too late and it seems prepared and rehearsed. So that doesn't sound like a truthful answer. That's a red flag.
So what happened this day?
As I said, the only source is Al-Qaeda. We cannot take it seriously, but our impression that
So he's nodding. It looks very congruent.
about the attack, as I said, it's not clear whether it happened or not. Because how can you verify a video? You have a lot of fake videos now. And you have the proof that those videos were fake, like the white helmets, for example.
Nice body language and so on, remarkable. Under a strict definition of proof, almost nothing counts as proof. So he gets away with anything because, it can never be proven.
They are Al-Qaeda, they are Nusra Front, who shaved their beard, wore white hats, and appeared as humanitarian heroes, which is not the case. The same people were killing Syrian soldiers, and you have the proof.
Now he has the proof?
Anyway. So the same thing for that chemical attack. We don't know whether those dead children.
This is quite important, I think. Those dead children, this is so-called distancing language.
We don't know whether those dead children.
So he's distancing himself from those dead children. He's not taking responsibility. So this is quite remarkable because being the president and apparently children dying in his country, you would expect if he didn't do it, that he would be intrinsically upset at this moment. Nevertheless, he's just pointing over there in a far distance and he claims he has nothing to do with it.
Of course, the foundation for us morally, we wouldn't do it if we have it. We wouldn't have to do it because morally it's not acceptable. We won't have the support of the public. So every indication is against the whole story. So we can say that this play that they staged doesn't hold together. The story is not convincing by any means.
So it is of course a good question, why would he attack civilians and hospitals? The only possibility is that he feels he's betrayed by these people, that they are the enemy somehow of him, and also that Syria is really all about him. It's not about the people of Syria, which are deflected maybe from the government and so on. Syria is really about him, and under this belief system, he might be able to justify these actions.
If your air force has been destroyed in this attack, as the Americans say?
I don't know what the criteria and what the reference of 20%.
So here again, it's about the definition of 20%.
100% for them. Is it the number of airplanes? Is it the quality? Is it the, the active airplanes, the stored airplanes? I don't know what do they...
So here it's really about the definitions and this is how he sees the world. This is how he takes no responsibility for anything. By redefining it and everything goes up in air.
What do you mean by this? No, actually what we and the Russians announced about few airplanes being destroyed, most of them are the old ones, some of them were not active. Anyway, this is the reality. And the proof that we've seen the strike, we haven't stopped attacking terrorists.
So here again we see this encarved facial expression of disgust. So normally disgust is one of the fundamental microexpressions, which are fleeting, very brief, sub-second expressions. In some of these leaders, they are encarved in the face. And again, the sadness line down here.
Like many other reports published by Amnesty International, put into question the credibility of Amnesty International. And we never look at it as unbiased. It's always biased and politicized. And it's shame for such organization to publish a report without a shred of evidence. They said it's based on interviews. Interviews. What about the document? What about the concrete evidence? Not single
interviews with 4 former prison officials and guards, 3 former Syrian judges, 3 doctors at
it means nothing. You need evidence, concrete evidence. You can make any report, you can pay money to anyone like Qatar did.
Nothing fulfills his high standard of what is evidence.
Have collected 3,000 pages of evidence and over 50,000 photographs taken by one of your former government's photographers showing emaciated, tortured bodies in your prisons.
Who verified the pictures? Who they verified that they're not edited and photoshopped and so on?
Have you seen the photos?
No, I didn't.
Same thing again. In summary, the asymmetry in Assad's face from recent years, such as the lost lines on the mouth corners, show an inner conflict and may indicate a strong hidden motivation. I don't think the lost lines necessarily come from the loss of his brother, because he took it quite lightly in the interview. Often these inner conflicts appear in people who have committed crimes. On the one hand, he shows congruency between his speech and body language. He's quite relaxed, in fact, and he uses illustrators. And his statements are very consistent over the years. All wars are bad and they have collateral damage. On the other hand, for certain narcissistic personalities, congruency is not difficult to achieve. And strong consistency also indicates rigidity in the belief system, which doesn't seem to adjust and evolve over the years. For instance, if you would listen to interviews by democratically elected European leaders from months and years apart, they would be different, because it would be about different topics, about different issues, but not so for Bashar al-Assad. He seems to create his own reality by carefully redefining words like Holocaust, dictator versus dictatorship, barrel bombs, what constitutes proof, and so on. He also shows verbal and gestural Freudian slips, like the predator or the claw hand, and he shows signs of distancing himself from his own people, like those children. Okay, in some sense, the complexity of the conflict is really reflected in Assad himself. Okay, I hope you liked the video and I talk to you next time. Bye.